Hey everybody, John here from the esports department going over the second LEC slate of the weekend. Today did not quite go as planned. Um, I was all in on Origin. I thought their ownership was going to be very low because people were generally pretty high on Mad Lions. That matchup projected to be very bloody. So if I could get the slight underdog side, like in the odds, I think Origin were a favorite, but in reality, I think most of us knew that Mad Lions was the favorite. But I didn't think it was by much. And if I could get the high upside of that matchup in all my lineups at low ownership, I decided to just pull the trigger on it and go with 100% Origin. Origin lost, so that didn't work out well for me. And I know cash games probably didn't go well for people with both G2 and Fnatic losing. That's it's tough to have a successful day in cash if those two teams lose. I guess you would have had to go with something like XL Misfits, or take the risk and played Mad in cash and gone XL Mad or Misfits Mad or something to have a really good cash lineup. But I'm sure it was a battle in the trenches in cash. I didn't play any cash since I was so heavy on GPP. But interesting little slate. I do have a disclaimer for this video. Game of Legends is not updated up to this point, so I have to use the same stats from yesterday, other than team record, which I can obviously update. The Bovada odds are updated. I've updated KPWs and DPLs, but the other stats, as far as gold per minute and stuff like that, are still the same as they were before yesterday's games. You can kind of assume, most likely, that any team that won yesterday probably improved their stats a little bit, and any team that lost yesterday probably lost a little bit of stat. So let's have a look at what tomorrow's slate looks like, and keep in mind, fresh in our minds, what happened today, and see where we might be able to take advantage, especially of the things that happened today. This slate I don't think is going to lend itself that much to that, but let's talk about it anyway. First up on the slate, Origin minus 500. They're 3-3 on the season, versus Schalke 0-6 on the season. They are plus 333. I don't see any reason to go to Schalke here, to be honest with you. Let's look at the numbers first, and then I'll talk about the matchup. Gold per minute, 1733 to 1562. Gold differential per minute, 57 to minus 310. Schalke better with the objectives, 60-40 with first blood and first turret versus 40-20 for OG. Gold difference is at 15, minus 1069 for Schalke. Is a minus 112 for Origin. We kind of expect that from them with how they play, but it's still not it's still a bit of a red flag. Damage per minute, 1899 to 1572. So Origin fighting better as well. Kill per win, death per loss, 15 and 11.6 for Origin, 13.3 death per loss for Schalke. So low number, very low number, bordering on around average, but a little bit below. So this just doesn't seem like an intriguing matchup to mess with. Schalke doesn't seem like they're worth messing with. They've looked awful. Origin is a good team, and I think they're a team that punches down pretty well, which we've talked about in the past. They play such a solid fundamental style of league that I don't think they're going to lose very often to like really terrible teams. Somebody like G2 plays such a wild style, they can lose to Schalke. Even though they have a huge talent edge, they can lose to a team like Schalke. A team like OG, I usually don't feel that way about them. They're the kind of team that I think does really well against teams below them and does really badly against teams that are better than them. So I don't see a ton of reason to touch this matchup. Like, if you combine the KPW DPL, if we assume that Origin is going to win, they're still only looking at like 14 kills and a win on average. That's not something that's exciting to me. We'll look at the individual scores in a minute, obviously, but this whole game feels pretty unexciting overall. Misfits and XL. Misfits minus 215, 3-3 on the season. XL plus 155, 2-4 on the season. Let's look at some stats. Gold per minute, 1693 to 1708. Both these teams won today, so we should see a spike a little bit for both. Gold differential per minute, minus 113 to minus 156. 2060 on first blood, first turret versus 4080. Gold difference at 15, minus almost 1100 and plus 581. Damage per minute, 1533 to 1635. So we have a mixed set of stats here. Some look like they go in Misfits' advantage. Some look like they go in Excel's advantage. It's kind of back and forth. I'll say for Excel, we've seen them drafting Cries a lot of things like Kale and kind of scaling later game top laners. And if they are at plus 581 at 15 minutes, despite the fact that they're drafting compositions that scale well, it just tells you that the execution hasn't really been there. But in the last two games, XL's looked quite good. Misfits didn't earn anything from me in their victory today. They barely eked out a win in a matchup that they should be winning almost every time. This feels like a really good XL spot to me. You notice also that, well, Misfits' kills when they win are very low, and XL's deaths when they lose are kind of low. XL's wins and Misfits' losses line up pretty well to about a 17, which is a good number for the LEC. XL seems like they're in a really good spot tomorrow. Alternatively, I think Misfits is playable. XL's been known to get in some scraps over the years. They were one of the highest death per loss teams last split, and we have a very small sample this season, so I don't think I would take something like this 13.7 as, God's word. It's what we have based on the samples that we've dealt with so far. But I think I really like XL in this spot. If you wanted to play Misfits, I wouldn't hate that either. They seem like they have a reasonable shot to score some points here. I like XL quite a bit more, but Misfits is definitely playable for me. Both of these teams would be more playable than the teams that were in the first game for sure. Going down to the third matchup, SK and Vitality. Looking at the numbers for them, 1794 gold per minute for SK versus 1687 for Vitality. A positive gold differential per minute at almost 100. Vitality at just about negative 100. First blood, first turret, advantage to SK. Gold difference at 15. 631 to minus 800, so a huge disparity there. And damage per minute, 1692 to 1500. So I don't see a lot of reason to take Vitality in this matchup. There's probably better spots on the slate, especially given that Vitality is only plus 105, which is probably going to lure some people over there, even though it's not really that good of a matchup as far as I'm concerned. SK's looked very good. They just came off beating G2. It's tough to see where people are going to land on Vitality. I'm guessing they're probably too expensive. Let's see, in price. Yeah, Vitality coming in as the most expensive of the underdogs is overpriced for this matchup, and I kind of expected that because they're plus 105, just like right on the edge of being an underdog. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. SK's looked an awful lot better. All the stats lean towards SK. I can't see a ton of reason to touch Vitality unless you think that the win by SK over G2 yesterday will just drive Vitality's ownership down to like near zero. If Vitality's like 5% owned, I'll get some Vitality in my stacks. But if they're going to be 10, 11% owned, I don't see how you mess with them at that, given that SK's looked significantly better than them. As far as scoring, 13 KPW for SK, not exciting. Facing up against a 17, so you're looking at somewhere right in the 15.1 range as far as expected kills per win. Not exciting. If you go to Vitality, it's 16, a little bit more exciting, but not over the top. Feels like a decent day to play SK as a nice safe team. The minus 140 is a joke as far as I'm concerned. Like they got to be a bigger favorite than that in this matchup. That's like a clear bet. It's probably changing as I'm doing this video, so even if you haven't read Gelati's blog yet, I recommend you run out and grab this minus 140. I think that's a pretty great bet. But yeah, not a lot of reason to touch Vitality unless you want to go for that lower ownership that they might have, and they really might on a slate like this. Let's look at the next matchup. G2 at minus 180. Fnatic at plus 130. 3-3 for Fnatic, 3-3 for G2. Match of the week. They got a good laugh out of that because the last matchup is actually the most exciting match of the week. And this would be the first time that G2 versus Fnatic wasn't the most exciting match of the week in like about 10 splits. Looking at their numbers, at least going into yesterday, 1793 for G2, 1842 for Fnatic. Gold differential per minute. Fnatic takes the lead, 130 to 44. Objectives, first blood, first turret, 80-40 to 40-20. Gold difference at 15, plus 963 to plus 15. And damage per minute, 1646, 1629. So Fnatic is just better in all these metrics than G2 so far this season, and G2 lost again today. Fnatic did as well. So we'll have to see how those end up affecting their numbers in the end, but I mean, people are just playing better than G2 so far this season. I will say, for me, a lot of it's compositional. They're playing champions and strategies. G2's playing champions and strategies that nobody else is bothering with, and it seems like they think it works. Fnatic has been kind of similar. They're also playing champions and strategies that most other teams are not messing with right now. And it seems like these two teams are kind of too much in their own world and trying to make the world the way they want it to be. I think if you saw G2 and Fnatic just go start playing standard compositions and put perks on Aphelios and teach him how to play it, put perks on the champions that he was playing before, or even go put him on Xayah, go put him on Kai'Sa, put him on something like that, put caps on the same stuff he was playing before. If you went a bit to Fnatic and you just started putting Reckless on Aphelios every game, I know they played Aphelios yesterday and lost. Nemesis was pretty awful in that loss. On Karma as well, which I'm not a fan of those. I'm not a fan of those compositions, dude. I'm not a fan of the mid lane Lulu. I get what you're trying to do with it. They played mid lane Karma, but I'm not a fan of the mid lane Karma, the mid lane Lulu. Open up your damages, get more cores of damage, in my opinion. I recognize that it can be strong to have a hyper carry and a bunch of people to protect them. We went through those compositions for years. Protect Kog'Maw type compositions, protect the Vayne with Uzi. I just don't think it's the best thing to be doing right now, and I think both these teams are trying out weird things that as soon as they stop trying out weird stuff, they're probably going to go back towards the top. They may not be the best regular season team in the split, either one of them, but I think they'll both come back towards the top. As far as DFS, so far this season, G2 averaging just under 17 kills per win to 16 of Fnatic's deaths per loss, so you're looking at a bit over 16. Fnatic only averaging just under 14 kills per win with 15 deaths per loss for G2. So these two teams have ceased being the bloodiest teams in the league, which they had been forever, and are kind of middle of the pack now. That said, this is such a pride matchup that just seems like it always gets wild. I can't see the winner of this matchup not being pretty high scoring. The stats would tell you Fnatic. The stats would tell you to just go with Fnatic here. I think probably I'm going to end up with some shares of both of these teams. We'll have to see what they project at in a minute, but I imagine I end up with some shares of both of these teams, especially in this matchup. I would think this is going to be a bit of a slobber knocker, so to speak. So I think this is a good matchup to target either side. Fnatic with one of the other favorites, G2 with one of the underdogs. Get them in there and feel good about it. It's also probably one of the best prices we're going to get on these teams. Like, if you look at salary, like OG is more expensive than G2 tomorrow. Like, that's fantastic. And Fnatic is cheap as hell. You don't get Fnatic at this price. So great spot to get these teams in good setups, I think. And the last match of the day, and very exciting, the two 5-1 teams. Mad at -130, Rogue at -105. And the stats are interesting, man. Look at that. 1835 to 1853, super close. Plus 189 to plus 167. 6080 to 6060. 532 to 373. The damage per minute is where Rogue falls like way off the track versus Mad, but they have a slight advantage in every other statistic. So this is another spot where this just feels like a game you want to be involved with. There's some games on this slate that I don't think you want to be involved with, like that first game, Origin and Schalke. That feels like a game you can just avoid. This SK Vitality game, I think, might be a little bit on the lower end. Even the XL Misfits one, not exciting as these last two matchups. The last two feel like they should have a lot of the ownership. It reminds me kind of MMA. In MMA, the main events just always have insane ownership, and there's a good reason for it in MMA, but that's how today feels to me. It's like you're going to have so many people with no players used going into the last two games of the slate, I feel like. You can try to pivot for ownership and try to get some of that XL, maybe try to get some SK, try to get some Vitality, but a lot of lineups are going to be involving the teams in these last two games for sure, and there's good reason for it. The stats point to these being the bloodier games. If you look here, 17.6 to 16, so you're looking at a 16.7 or whatever as the expectation, 16.8, and then if Rogue wins 16.2 and 22. You're looking at 19.1. That's a huge expectation for Rogue if they win. So Rogue, I think, makes a really good play as well. What's their price like in the grand scheme of things? Just cheap. Just cheapity cheap. Yeah, Rogue, way, way too cheap on this slate. I feel like that's just DraftKings' fault. Unfortunately, it probably drives some ownership there, too. I did talk about Mad Lions as being a team that people just want to target. They like targeting them, and they target them a lot. They were higher owned than Origin today, despite being the quote-unquote underdog. This just makes a great matchup to target no matter which way you go with it. Like, Mad isn't even that expensive. Fourth most expensive team. This is just, like, for me, pretty much an all-in spot. By far the highest projected game. It's on the same slate with G2 and Fnatic, which is going to just eat up ownership from people. It makes a lot of sense to go all in on this Mad and Rogue game. Whether you're going all in on Mad, all in on Rogue, or 50-50, or some mixture of it, I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. You can still mix them with the people from G2 Fnatic if you want, but I think it makes a lot of sense to do this. The only thing that might detract from that is this is probably the matchup where the two teams feel like they have the most on the line. Two teams being 5-1, playing for the first seed, might scale back the aggressiveness a little bit, but it's just a regular season game. I feel like they're just going to do what they do, and if they do what they do, they've been the bloodiest teams in the league so far, so it makes a lot of sense to just get it on board with this matchup for me. Let's look at some ownership here. Rogue, Mad, Fnatic, G2, OG, SO4, Vitality, SK, Misfits, and XL. Looking at ownerships, I'm going to put either Mad Lions or G2 at the top. My guess is Mad Lions. I'm going to go Mad Lions followed by G2. But I actually think you're going to see higher ownership from the underdogs in these matchups than you will be from some other favorites. I'm trying to decide if I think that Origin might end up with some decent ownership just because they're playing such an easy matchup. They probably will. They don't deserve it, but they probably will get a lot of ownership. I wouldn't be surprised if SK in their matchup against Vitality gets some ownership. It's really tough for me between whether I would go with SK as the next chosen team or Fnatic and Rogue. Like, Fnatic and Rogue are going to be very highly owned. I think I would go with Rogue here, especially since Rogue is priced. They're just priced in such a good way, and you don't have to play against G2. I think Rogue is capable of beating Mad, and people will see that. SK probably comes in next, Fnatic after that. This matchup I think is going to get mostly left alone and is actually kind of a sleeper. Should be Misfits. Shulk is definitely going to be last. And I think more people will kind of see what I'm seeing with XL than people that will go with Vitality. It feels like something like this to me. I wouldn't be surprised to see Fnatic and Rogue switch spots, or to see SK usurp them, so I guess if I'm choosing 3 spots, it's probably these 3. As far as like places where I'm kind of questionable about where the ownership might land, I'd probably go with that as the 3 spots where I'm not 100% sure. But these, this looks like a decent ownership setup as far as I would just think it out there. Let's look at the favorites and see where we're getting points from. As far as the favorites go, sort by projection, G2 still projecting the highest, followed by Mad, then Misfits, OG, and SK at the bottom. We kind of talked about that, just not matchups that I'm really looking to target. And if OG is second last on Alfari, they're probably going to be closer to last on a lot of other positions too, because he tends to score pretty decently. But G2 and Mad showing up at the top. G2 and Mad again, Misfits in the middle, OG and SK at the bottom. Fairly uniform as far as the drop-offs go. G2 and Mad. SK actually jumps up into third for that one, but OG remaining right near the bottom there with SK. Upset projects pretty well, makes a decent one-off if you're trying to do something very weird. G2 still projecting the highest. Carzzy, surprisingly enough, Carzzy just hasn't had like huge averages. At least he's not projecting that well, and I know that Humanoid had some really big games in there too, kind of taking away from the 80 carry value, I guess. Crown Shot, who I know Roberts is just the biggest fan of. He's a good player, but he doesn't project very well tomorrow. Not looking very good for SK or OG when it comes to projections. Misfits kind of mixed in there with them. So you're going to want to target G2 and Mad, really. I mean, there's not a lot of other ways to look at it. Like Misfits, I guess, is your best shot. Putting them in third, you know, you could try to sneak Misfits in there and hope they have an upside game against Excel. But the ownership is just going to be so high on G2 and Mad, and you're going to have to dodge both of them winning, because even if you dodge G2, if Mad wins, like, they should blow the absolute roof off of any Misfit score. It's really tough to get away from G2 and Fnatic on this, or G2 and Mad on the upside of the slate. and that's really unfortunate for us because it makes the slate a lot less playable, I think. Let's look at the underdogs. I think we're going to see something very, very similar when we look at them. Fnatic. Schalke is probably going to be pretty high, even though we just don't give them almost any chance to win. Then Rogue in third. Fnatic and Rogue with Schalke. Rogue, Schalke, Nemesis just projecting awfully. He's just turning into like the Nuke Duck of Fnatic. Fnatic and Rogue. Vitality actually jumping up. Comp projecting pretty well if they manage to beat SK. And Fnatic and Rogue again. Oh, it's really just honestly not a very good slate, guys. There's just so clearly two matchups that you're supposed to be putting your ownership on that I'm not, and they're not matchups where I can be like, aha, people are going to think that these are going to be bloody, but they're not. Like, they're actually just supposed to be really bloody, and people are going to know that. It's just really straightforward that people are going to be aware that those are the best two matchups. You could try a game stack as something weird. I mean, they both have such high blood potential. You could try game stacking a Mad Rogue or a Fnatic G2 even makes sense to me. I'm just not really sure exactly where you find your leverage on this slate. I think kind of everybody is going to understand what's going on this slate. When you spread out who Rogue and Mad and Fnatic and G2 are playing against a little bit, it gets a little bit more murky for people. But since they're all playing each other, it just straight isolates it down to like 2 games. I think you could try something with Misfits and XL to try to get some lower ownership. I think that game has some potential, but doesn't look good in general as far as trying to find some value that other people aren't going to see. For cash games, I don't see how I can mess with Mad Rogue or G2 Fnatic in cash games. I know people are going to want to, but I don't even see how you can touch those games in cash games. Maybe G2, but I don't think you can touch Mad Rogue. I don't see how you can find Fnatic for sure. G2 would be, I think it's something like SK Misfits or SKXL. SKOG makes the most sense, I guess. What does it look like if you go with SK and OG? Vitality's still mixed in there. Top lane captain, 199 expectation. That's a very low expectation for a matchup like this. If you wanted to mix in the Misfits, what would you get out of the Misfits? What if you did Misfits and OG instead of SK? Ups your projection by a couple points. It's still a top lane captain. It's not a good day for cash or GPP, really. You're putting yourself, if you play one of these lineups are very safe, and I think they're long-term decent ROI. If you play, say, OG and SK, excuse me. If you play OG and SK, like, I think it's long-term positive ROI. You're forcing your opponents to choose who they want out of Mad, Rogue, G2, Fnatic, and they're going to be wrong enough that when you combine it with the random chances that those games just aren't that high scoring. I mean, G2's games haven't been high scoring in general this season. There's always a chance that game just kind of burns out. Then I think it's going to be positive ROI long-term, but it is tough. You may look for a different team slot. These team slots are pretty expensive. If you drop down to, say, Misfits team slot with this lineup, it's playing 4 Misfits. What if you drop down to, yeah, it would have to be, it's really all you can get. You've got Origin, SK, and then you could do Misfits. You could drop down to SK Gaming's team slot in that Origin lineup and try to upgrade your captain. Those are 3 pretty safe teams, but I think maybe you just might have to go with Origin, SK, Gen X. He's a good scorer. You can play Gen X, Zazie, and the other 4 members of OG with SK team. It's safe. It's reliable. You're going to get blown out if your opponents are choosing the right sides of those other games. But I think you just have to put that test to them on this slate because those other 2 games are very hard to predict. And this at least gives you a very safe, solid lineup that you can put in there. If one of their teams that they're stacking fails, then you'll pick up the money. And occasionally, everybody will win, and OG will just have a weird ceiling game, or SK will have a weird ceiling game, and you'll be able to pick up some money by beating them anyway. Just a very, very bizarre slate tomorrow that I guess is a little bit less exciting than I might have thought at first glance, because it has some great matchups to watch as a fan. But from a DFS perspective, I'm not really sure where we're finding that much of our edge tomorrow, to be honest. It'll probably be a light slate for me. Maybe with some double underdog type stuff that you might be able to take advantage of. So that's all for me today, guys. Interesting little slate. We'll talk more tomorrow about North America and stuff like that. But hit me up on Twitter, Discord, all that kind of stuff, and chat about League of Legends, man. I'll talk to you guys later.